Hi, I'm Vinnie with Volossal Publishing, and we are here with Kyle S. Colgan, author of Death by Culture Shock. So let's just jump right in. Kyle, what is or what was the inspiration for this book, and how does that tie into the title?
Well, I guess the inspiration, it was I kind of have a film background and I started writing prose as kind of an experiment because I was jaded from my film career and I just wanted to try something different creatively and because I didn't know what I was doing it for filmmaking and but I still wanted to tell stories. So uh, 2020, which is, January 2020, right before the pandemic, I started just typing this story, what would be the story. It was actually a play at first, but I mean, my inspiration always comes from, me, my personal life, and I don't really have a wall behind th there's a there's not much transparent there isn't much transparency between me and the subject that I write about, but it's always like a rumination of things that are in my head and an exploration of scenes that didn't quite happen but were felt. But it's kind of different from the title. The title was just something that I had um, that I really liked because it was actually a short film that I made, I think in college, but I don't know if it was like freshman year or sophomore year. And I just loved the title. I thought it was funny. I like that when you said it, people laughed. And I don't know if people do that anymore. Like, when I say it, people don't necessarily laugh, but there was always something witty about it. Death by Culture Shock. There's something, I just loved how it sounded. And now with the cover, it like the colors and everything, just like it still feels right to me. But I actually didn't, there was, the story was, the story that I'm exploring in the novel had a lot to do with grief. So, and it was grief of the loss of my father-in-law, but he wasn't my father-in-law at the time. He was my girlfriend's father. And going through that with her and being by her side as that was happening and unrolling and how that did affect our relationship because that was something that was hard to explain and how do you show up for someone that you love that you want to show up for but also while she's going through something where you know, it's a complete roadblock of how to heal, especially when it's early on, even after a year in grief is early on. So that was always like a nice title for the book and in exploring that sort of story. But really, I wasn't sure about the title for a long time while writing it. Like 4 years into writing it, it was just a working title. And when I talked about the father in the book, that is where it kind of landed when I was exploring his background, which is fictional and made up, but um, but it was like through an accident and of his guilt and his own grief, because but yeah, essentially that's why I kept the title, and that's where the inspiration came from.
You mentioned the cover. Can you tell us a little bit about the idea for the cover and I know I did the layout, but the actual artist who made the
Yeah.
art for the cover, think's pretty interesting.
Yeah, half and half. Uh I never met her personally, but I reached out to her via her website when uh I think it was my wife who actually met her at a Pakistani um uh like it was an art they were raising money for a flood that happened in Pakistan, and she, brought home some like work of hers, like samples and whatever. And, it's obviously it was like she makes these beautiful hands and these beautiful like Southeast Asian I don't even know, like artifacts, and they almost seem religious to me, but they're not necessarily. They could be. I don't know what her interpretation of her work is, but there is something culturally conservative about them. But it's, also like poppy in a way, So I mean, aesthetically, uh, I loved it, and I just thought, the this is about an interracial couple, and I really wanted to tell a story. It was very important to me to not tell one person's side of the relationship. You see that a lot through this person's perspective and or that person, or yeah, there are books where there's like book one, book two, book three, and it's in like through different people, the overlapping of certain characters in over like one chapter per person, male, female. But I really loved kind of like the Gone Girl approach of like her, him, and these overlapping stories. And there are other books like it. It's not like a one book did, like IQ 84 by Murakami or Sally Rooney's Normal People were huge influences. And when I was trying to tell my story, I couldn't talk about myself and my relationship without really going into the characters of an exploration of my wife. But even though like, that those characters are made up of me in both one talking about her and like Dale. It's not so linear, But regarding the art, the idea was to have some sort of he her approach, and I wanted it to showcase both of them just like the book does, but it really wasn't working. We were going through a lot of ideas, and it kind of came out looking like a young adult novel cover, which wasn't our intention, and for the both of us. And it was interesting because I've never had the experience of like as an artist myself, I know how sensitive this is, and getting criticism, is a wonderful thing, but at the same time, and it's very helpful and important, but you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, and especially you want to get it right, and so it was a great experience because of how it worked out, and it was kind of a magical moment too, because we were going through different ideas and scenarios, and I had just said there's a scene in the book where Kajal goes to see her father's headstone for the first time after like a year after his passing, actually. And I told her about this. Um, and because we wanted to steer away from faces, because she makes these hands, her hands are so, the way she does hands half and half is so authentic and beautiful. And she does faces beautifully too, but it just wasn't working in the scenario. So I was like, well, let's focus on that and let's take this scene of Kajal visiting her father's grave. And in real life, this is the magical cinematic, you can't make this kind of shit up sort of thing where I was at the cemetery visiting my now father-in-law's grave when Half and Half sent me the image. And it was just
Yeah.
like miraculous, like literally the image of the book is, a Southeast Asian woman kneeling before a grave, right? But the fact that we had just experienced the image that she sent to me in the moment that it happened, I mean, it had a sort of spiritual, divine sort of like, well, this is it, whether we like it or not, because like the universe is telling us that this is the cover, and like, hello, and I write in an autobiographical way anyway, so like this was literally art and life coming together and being one. And I was, I'm so happy. I couldn't be happier about the cover. It's gorgeous, and she did a great job. And yeah, it was awesome.
A couple things I like about it. A lot of times we want to show a face or something like that, but you're an avid reader and we like to generate the imagery in our head. So by not knowing what the people look like, I conjure images in my own head, which are, I don't want to say pleasing to me, but everybody, you describe the characters well, like a lot of books do that. But I think the minute you put an image on the cover, then we're picturing that particular image. And if that's important, that's fine. But I like that you allowed us to have our own mental image of the characters. I also like that you are very open to collaboration and feedback. You use the word criticism, and I know that is what they say, and you use that word in class and all that kind of stuff when you take. But um,
Constructive criticism.
there's always this negative connotation, but it's really feedback. And one of the things that I would stress is why your book, see, I'm looking up too now, why your book is
You're doing great.
successful. Why your book, and I say successful because to make something that's good to me is the success. It doesn't matter, well, after that, but in order to do that, feedback and collaboration are extremely important. So when you work with the artist, it wasn't just, hey, draw me this. You seemed to collaborate, and when it came together correctly, it, yeah, it hit hard. And you're like, yeah. And even when I saw it, but not even having the full backstory, I was like, ooh, this is really cool. And then the other thing is you and I collaborated a lot just on cover design and ideas and interior looks and just a bunch of details that make something great other than good or satisfactory. That's always what I'm about. And so it was really good to work with you on that level.
Yeah, absolutely.
I admire and appreciate and see the value in collaboration and feedback because it's very easy to get caught up in this is mine and I don't want it changed. And, they're even sort of highlighting that in that Bruce Springsteen trailer where he's like, it has to be like this. Okay, yeah, great. I had
Right.
a lot of things to say about a Bruce Springsteen album,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
go back and start over. But
Right.
you mentioned your wife. When you began writing this book, was she your wife yet or still your girlfriend?
She was my girlfriend when
Okay.
I started writing it. Yeah. Yeah, it
And
was
so you got married
and
mid story,
yeah.
mid, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and your wife is Pakistani,
Hmm.
and that obviously contributes to the story.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about how that fits in? I mean, I know you touched on it, but I mean,
Her background, like like being Pakistani.
yeah, and the interracial marriage and how it ties to the story.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a good question because I don't know. When we did get married, I converted to be a Muslim, but I'm not practicing. I just went through the ceremony, and that was, and why I bring that up, it wasn't like it was important for her, you know, but in order to have just like, if you were to get married in a church or something, people would have to if they wanted to get married in a Catholic church, they would have to convert, right? I mean, it's just, I guess it's the rule if that was important to the spouse. And for Fariha, it was to have a nikah, which is like a Muslim wedding, in order to use an imam, you'd have to convert. So why I'm bringing that up is the blending of cultures. When you get married, when you're in a relationship, you are not just you're not just you're bringing two people together, right? But at the same time, it's like, where you come from is relevant to that. And I think for her and her background being Muslim and Pakistani, that was something that was culturally important to hold on to, which I understood and embrace, with food and certain sort of like spiritual elements of it. But, we had been together for 15 years.
Mm.
And so coming from a Catholic school background, I just the importance of that relationship and that the blending of cultures was a great education to me. And I think in order to have any sort of relation, even if, even if it doesn't last, there's still something about, taking something in from other people that you meet in the world that isn't just your family, or your cousins, or even your friends that might be similar to your background or not. I live in and was born and raised in New York, so I'm very lucky to have a very diverse group of friends, and that was really important to me. And even though when you're sitting across the table with someone having a conversation, they're just a person, but like to embrace where they come from and they make you a meal, that your mom didn't cook, it's mind blowing. It's like the best education in the world. So it was just to embrace something completely unknown to me, which I was a very shy, introverted kid, but part of the blossoming of not being anymore, because I wouldn't identify necessarily as an introvert, though I love my alone time, um, was that embracing of something unknown and making it mine too, So I think that's really the only reason these characters are not from the same, not they don't have the same skin color, or they don't have the same background or religions, but that they come from two separate um, ethnicities and backgrounds in that way, and to see the overlap, to see the parallels actually was it's more so than in my film work was I able to see and really embrace in an artistic way where I was like, oh, these homes are aesthetically completely different, but not it, but in terms of trauma and in terms of the way a house is run, or the discomfort in a home, same thing,
Yeah.
and so, that to me is a wonderful, I'd rather know that than not, you know?
Yeah, I think I talk about this all the time that culturally I enjoy the buffet. I
Mhm.
like to go to things like I mean, it's funny you mentioned the food because that's me too. I was just having this talk with Maggie, another author, and she's vegan and she's from Poland and she's got all these different things. And we were talking about how fun it is to go to like a Mexican barbecue or to go to black church or something like that, where it's just, you're right, culture shock. Big, I mean, it is such, I would say almost an extreme experience, but then when you're in there and you relax and you see the value and you see like, yes, they have the same kind of things. And I think you capture that in the book as well. And that's one of the things I like about it. There's a lot of things I like about it, but yeah, I think that's a cool, unique thing, and especially in the time we are right now. And now we have our first Muslim mayor. You guys got a Muslim.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty wild. Uh, it's good to have these kind of positive things out there and things that are. I felt like your book read very honestly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's easy, like do that. We're the hero of our own story, or I'm going to tell it like this, and yours felt very. I know it's I guess we would say it's fiction based in truth, but it feels like a real story as
Mm.
opposed to something completely contrived. And I don't mind completely contrived. Like I love Marvel movies,
Yeah.
but this didn't feel like something, it just felt very real.
Thank you. And that was really hard to do. That was not like, I think as an autobiographical writer, I think people, and this isn't I don't care what people think. I'm not defending anything. That, if you write and admit that you write every writer, even, Frank Herbert writing Dune, is working through something. That that worm monster stands for something that means something. I don't know what, but he probably did emotionally in some abstract way. But that took 5 years to do.
Mhm.
I remember writing it, And people, you go to a party and then you say, hey, I'm writing a book, and you're just talking. You go to the next party a couple months later and you're still writing the same thing. I remember saying like, yeah, they're like, what are you writing about? I mean, I'm trying to make every moment matter.
Yeah.
And someone said back to me, I was like, yeah, I've read a lot of books where not every moment mattered. And it just, I was trying to make the first page match the last page emotionally and consistently. And you don't, even if it's a linear story, well, I guess there are, it jumps in time, but even if the book does, but even if you write a linear story, a linear novel, it is not written in an emotional sense in a linear way. Like that you might get part A and then D, but B and C are mangled, and you have to find a way to connect all pieces. And that takes a long time. Some things you get like you catch lightning in a bottle, and then other times you have to go to the mountain every day to rewrite it so that it looks like you did. And that's really hard. And that was the hard part. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It somebody once said the difference between good and great is details. And yes, 5 years to write a book. If other people go 5 years, well, that's the difference. And I think, I guess my advice, because I know other authors or people that are looking to be authors watch these,
Mhm.
and the advice that I hear you saying is you got to spend time. If you wrote the book and it took you a month and a half, you may want to get back in there again. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's really it's crafting. It's like a sculpture. It's like a painting. And I always talk about, like, I mentioned Lego. Like when
Yeah.
you're building that, it's like you just don't go do 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 do. You go, ah, and then you take it apart and start again. And writing is very much like that. And David Hayden Jones once told me, don't fall in love with your footage, don't fall in love with your words, because you need to be able to edit them out. You need to be able to say goodbye.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yes, that Willie Nelson, just it's training your ear. And Willie Nelson's son said, I forgot his name, but he's a musician also, and he said, you're ahead of the game if you know that you sound bad. You know, but something that was really scary, or really more profound, but like, man, like this can be tricky, uh, was no, like the things that the parts when you're writing, there are parts that you'll like every time you read them, but they are the most stubborn to get rid of because every time you read it, it makes sense. But then when you walk away, you're like, man, there's something wrong with that part. I keep going back to these scenes that aren't working. Something isn't working here, but every time I read it, it does. And then it was really just to your point, like real to kill your darlings is the real sense of like you're gonna have to get rid of stuff you like when in order for to make the best possible work. And that was a real education in learning that and killing things that you actually like that you wrote. And I don't know how to teach you can't teach people that.
Well, it's
You
trying to teach somebody humility. It's trying to teach people these are personal characteristics of what I would say is a good person. That you're not going to get a narcissist to
Write a great
change,
book.
right? And I there's reasons why I'm very careful about who I pick and who I want to work with, because um yeah, it's you're exactly the kind of author I like to work with, because it's like, yeah, this is when the first time I read it, I was like, ooh, this took some time. You could tell right away that this took some time. 5 years, I didn't that didn't hit me, but I think, all things considered, I can sort of see it now. And I think that's amazing, because yeah, to put yourself that far into a piece of artwork is really what you should be doing. I think we get, I worked in an art or a graphic design, what do you want to call it, advertising firm for several years, and we just cranking stuff out. And now with social media, it is all about cranking stuff out. And, you know, quality, I mean, it's there, but it's to me, the thought and the crafting, a lot of that is gone. A lot of that you're hearing in modern music too. We're not hearing anything real complex anymore. And then all of a sudden it dulls down our abilities, meaning like, you know, the audience gets dumber as the products get dumber. So something like yours, I think, is extremely valuable to have in the marketplace because it now ups the game.
Mm, good. Yeah.
It's like here,
Happy to do
hey,
it.
it's like, it's one of those things like not to get cocky on this stuff, but you have a book and someone said, "Oh, I wrote this book, and it took me 2 months or whatever. It took me 2 months, and I go, oh, that's adorable, and it's, it's a little bit of swagger, but I love that you took your time with it. So the big question on that is, how did you know when it was done?
Yeah. Well, I remember just saying to my wife, like, I don't want to read it anymore. Like, it was essentially just like I had read it so many times, so many times. I went over those lines millions of times, and I, I don't know if, I don't know if being done is necessarily the goal. I think it's more of like when because in any narrative, you can't write about everything. So it's almost like whatever you start writing about, in order for it to be consistent in a 300 page, whatever number of novel, you have to look at it through kind of like a telescope, sort of thing. And it all has to like being pulled through this kind of pipe of an idea. And that is actually really good because it helps you concentrate. But I think I think it's just about, and through having that limitation, I think it's kind of about knowing that there's nothing really more to add. That we're talking about things that are impossible to articulate. These are abstract feelings. Everyone, when you talk about grief, there isn't a right or wrong way to handle it. I mean, there's definitely probably like wrong ways, but there isn't one right way, I guess is a better way of putting it. And and so that this was just my experience, and for things that I was around that I was kind of, feeling and observing, and then took different aspects of my own life that were part of the same themes. And that's how the book kind of came to be. But, you know, I don't know if there is still, I think like 4 years into writing it, I had a different ending. It was the chapter before, and I always felt a little like unfinished about it. It felt too abrupt. It felt like, ambiguity done in the wrong way. So the last chapter to me is always kind of like a prayer in a lot of ways, because it came 4 years after writing what I thought was the finished thing. But there's probably always something in there that's like, could there be another chapter? Like I was part of a reading group, a book club read the book. And so I think last Sunday I was there in this apartment surrounded by people who have read the book. And it was kind of interesting because everyone loved Kajal's younger brother Ayed. And I had started writing a screenplay because I'm in grad school right now. And I took chapters 1 and 9 and kind of made, because they're connected, and I made it into one scene. And everyone's still like, what's going to happen to Ayed? Everyone was worried about him, and really nothing really does. His ending, these characters, if it's successful, they live on their own, but we're focusing on these two characters who are in a relationship, and then there are side characters to those lives. So, there's many novels in the story on some sense, because you can do the Hemingway thing and write The Old Man and the Sea and write like 100-page book, or you can, whatever 1,000-page novel, and it's just like a scene, or I don't know, it never ends. You just have to decide.
I think yours moves along at a very, very appropriate and comfortable pace. I have an issue with Hemingway a little bit, and I definitely have one with Steinbeck. And even I released my own version of Dracula. I mean, I didn't change anything, but I made it because a lot of kids have to read that book, and it's hard to get through. And I realized that back then people had a lot more time. They could sit and read, you could read 1,000-page book because you needed to burn up a lot of your time in your life. You didn't have, I mean, right now everything is so fast paced. So your book, it's just right. It really is. It's the Three Bears. It's just right. It really, and that's a thing. And I want to mention that even after we had it laid out and you were doing the proofing, you still came back with some changes. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of cool. Like you said I had no problem with it. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's get him in there. But even seeing it in a different context, like, okay, now I'm seeing it in book format,
Yeah,
changes
it
a little
did.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, like going from a Google Doc to like what it would look like when it just it was a nice perspective shift to have so that I can condense it and see what was really lagging. It's insane because like you can, people in New York or anywhere, I guess, but I've gone to these open mics, and you just read something you're working on and you hear when something doesn't work when you're reading into a loud microphone, and that's a great way to learn how to edit yourself and train your ear, but also like seeing it in different contexts. Like sometimes I don't have the discipline as a like to write longhand because like I can't write in the I can't get into a flow state writing in longhand. It's really annoying. So that's why I write everything through like my computer on like a Word doc. But yeah, seeing it in that different context was like a great shift of perspective.
Okay. So one last question. You mentioned the going having it that a book club read it. What's it like to walk into a book club after knowing that they all read the book?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were all very nice, and it was like I think I was very emotionally dysregulated, to be honest with you. Like that was the first time that happened to me, and it was a bit of a disaster internally. Like I was just like, hello, 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 but like smiling through it. But once you sit down and you start talking and people are polite, I think in general, especially in someone's living room, and they were, I'm not, people were very kind and they said wonderful things about it. And I think having my context, like, was just nice for people to hear. And, you see people's heads shaking in agreement, and that always is nice validation. And then even when people say like, oh, I could have, like I said, they wanted more of Ayed, and then that's where I was like, well, I wish I could have given you more. But they're really like, if you're going through that kind of pipe thing that I was telling you earlier, it's like you can't, in order to make a book and have consistent pacing and tone, at least with my first novel, I couldn't stray away that much, but, yeah, it was interesting and intimidating, but really overall a great and wholesome experience. So I appreciated that.
All right. So Kyle S. Colgan, the book is called Death by Culture Shock. It is available everywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's in multiple countries. There is no problem finding it. And I know you have plans to get out there and do some more promotion. So I'm excited to hear, how all that stuff goes. And like I said, once again, really enjoyed working on this book, and we're very proud to have it on the Volossal label. It's a cool one.
Thanks, Vinny. It's been an honor working with you, and this was a great experience, and so was this. This was super fun. So thanks for everything. I really, really do appreciate it, honestly.
Cool.